Thank you for being here this evening. I think some of you may have been to our healing panel and heard our guest Sam as part of that panel. Tonight we'll get a chance to delve into Sam's background and experiences in more detail and welcome him here tonight. I'm looking forward to this, and if everybody would please mute your microphones so that Mark and Sam are the only two that will be heard at some point. Depending on how many people we have, we might open it up for voice questions, but I'll leave up to Leslie to handle that later on. So with that said, Mark, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Jim. We're excited to have Sam Bo Thompson here with us today. He was on the healing panel, as Jim had said a few weeks ago, and he's going to talk about his book, Metal Never Lies. And I have a copy of it here. You have, Sam has one back in the background, but it's all about magical blacksmithing. And Sam is a primitive blacksmith, and he teaches magical blacksmithing as well. And we're going to get into this during this time. But Sam, let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up as a blacksmith.
Well, I'm Southern Appalachian, and I remember growing up, and where I grew up, pretty much everybody had a smith, right? I remember finally my grandfather having one in his workshop, and it was you never bought a new tool, right? You fixed what you had. It was, because you had to order one from Sears and Roebuck, and it was a 3-4 week wait before you got anything, right? So you learn to kind of make do with it. And about a decade or so ago, I wanted to do something to, honor him. I was getting into honoring my ancestors. And that was one of the things I always kind of, reminded me of him. And I looked into, learning it. And, did what most people do and hit the internet, and I found out pretty quick that they were pretty proud of all the tools and everything that went in, to learning that craft. And I found out about a little school up in the mountains. I went up in a week, and it was literally, it's how I teach it now. It's primitive. It's you just dig a hole in the ground and you smith, because we've been, as a species have been, blacksmithing, doing metalwork since the Iron Age, and nothing's changed really. You still get it hot, you still get it hard, it's not a whole lot of new stuff,
No, that's cool. And you're in Northwest North Carolina now. That's where you're living.
Yes, I am kind of between Winston and Mount Airy. I'm closer to Mount Airy than I am Winston, but I am over in the mountain.
Yeah, that's a beautiful
at the foothills.
Beautiful part of the state. So it's cool. And your family was from Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina. So when we
all my family's from East Tennessee. And I grew up, my mom, she wanted, she was the rebel, so she wanted to move away and just moved over to the other side of the mountain, basically. So it was East Tennessee. Western North Carolina is where I grew up.
Yeah. So if you could tell us a little bit about how magical blacksmithing is different from regular primitive blacksmithing.
Well, a lot of it is, I'm a bit of an animist, right? Well, more of a bit. I am an animist, okay? And words mean stuff. So my definition of that is everything has an energy, a vibration, a spirit, lack of a better word to it. And as I started working with the metal and started blacksmithing, and I got more on my own personal path, I started to pick up on these little nuances as I was doing the work, and I was getting others that were asking me, hey, can you make me a tool? Can you make me an amulet? Can you make me whatever? And as I was doing more work with that, I became more aware of it, to where it became more substantive than just junk, and one thing led to another, and it really took me down a rabbit hole, and I started reading and trying to do some research. There's not a lot out there. There's a lot of it in the old Irish lore that I found that really kind of spoke to me, and just kind of over the last few years, just really worked hard. I do this for a living, so this is all I do. So I have the privilege of being able to, live this, for lack of a better word. And, just the more I worked it, the more it worked me, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Right. And on the healing panel, I remember saying that you were an unusual bird. And I just want to reemphasize that too, because when we talk about consciousness and the different kinds of consciousness, people normally think about humans and animals and even plants. But from your perspective, metals are conscious as well.
Every bit.
Everything.
Every bit. I mean, one of the things I think that we have become desensitized to it, numb, more. I mean, just flat out, since the Industrial Revolution, we have disconnected from metal. And I think it's a travesty because, number one, it is us.
Yeah.
We have a lot of it within our makeup, and we can't survive without it. All right. Talk to anybody that's got iron poor blood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk to anybody that's, has a copper deficiency, and these are metal, that you usually get from, obviously your, vegetables and that kind of thing you get kind of naturally, but I mean, it's a part of us and we can't live without it. And I think we have become numb to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in very much our everyday surroundings, and we don't even see it. We don't feel it. We don't notice it. It's just, we didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah. You made a comment on one of our conversations or during one of our conversations that metals are the blood and bones of the earth.
That's kind of how I see it. I look at it as, as you look back into the 1920s, when they were erecting all the skyscrapers, right? They were all made out of these big metal steel beams that then the buildings were wrapped around,
mm-hmm.
right? So I looked at it as being the bones, right? I saw them as being the bones. And then the copper being kind of the blood, because I've always kind of had a very flowy feel with copper. It has a very low heating point, relatively speaking. Okay. It's very natural. It's very healing. It's antimicrobial. I mean, it just has that kind of blood, kind of, juiciness to it, lack of a better word. And we have it, copper's, we're surrounded by it. It's running through our homes where we live by, what runs our electricity.
Yeah.
It's the power.
And you use copper and steel in the courses that you teach.
Yes. In the magical ones I do, I have yet to find a good enough source to break out bronze or brass, but we do use copper and steel because I think those are two that are relatively easy to acquire.
Uh-huh.
And even, somebody that wants to work with it, I mean, you run down to your local big box store and, it's there, you don't have to search for it, if you want to practice it yourself.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention that because it was another comment you made too, is that part of your work is providing a safe space so other people can do their work. And
yeah. So when people come here and study, and I teach several different classes, one is just the primitive smithing, if they just want to come and learn the craft. Okay. So I have that. And then I have two others that we work with, magical blacksmithing, and that is more of an immersion. And with that, what we do is we kind of go through a process that I've developed that take people through, kind of ritualistic work, guided meditations. We do some really in-depth work with the different metals and how our connection with our relationship with them are, and give people time on the land, because we have our land here is pretty cool. I'm very biased because I live here, but we have a labyrinth and that kind of thing. And it just gives people an opportunity to spend some time, and disconnect from the world and connect to the metal that surrounds them anyway. And I think that's a big plus. I think, it's a practice, right? So like any practice, you got to work it.
Right.
It's not something you can just sprinkle some fairy dust over it and all of a sudden, boom, I've got it.
Yeah. And just talking about all the metal that are in people's lives, there's a lot of things people don't think about.
Yeah, I mean, some common ones, is what people have in their kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably surrounded by steel of some sort. The difference between steel and iron is 2% or less carbon. That's it. So basically coal, and that's what makes steel from iron. There's not a great big disconnect from the two. I sometimes use them interchangeably, although that's not technically correct. So you've got it, in your kitchen. If you drive anywhere to work, most likely your car's steel. Most likely, I don't want to judge anybody, but chances are pretty good your car's steel. And it's got a lot of copper in it too, with all the wiring and all that kind of stuff. And we are surrounded every day by these elements, by these things, that can be used more as an ally versus just strictly a widget. You take care of your tools, and your tools will take care of you. Kind of a thought, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. But I thought it was interesting just how much we take for granted that we have so much metal in our lives, with the keys that are in our pockets or our purses, the coins. And I didn't really think about it until I read your book. So
yeah, and it's
really interesting.
I have to remind myself sometimes, to be honest, because it's just, once again, even, once it's a practice, right? So I'm practicing too. We have just become so numb and so desensitized to it. It's like everything else, everything we have has built-in obsolescence to it, right? Which is why 95% of the metal that I work with is repurposed, upcycled, recycled, whatever you want to say. It's all, one man's trash is another man's treasure. I like it for several reasons. One, I'm becoming a part of the solution, right? I'm taking it, out of trash. Two, I'm trying to give it another use, right? Because, just because it doesn't serve that purpose doesn't mean it can't serve another.
Yeah.
And it has a story, it has a history. And, I think it's really cool to take, I'll find, we'll take this for instance, hay tines, right? And what I mean by hay tines is, here in the country, somebody, does hay, right, for their cattle, or horses or whatever. These are these big springy metal things on the back of the tractor that rakes the hay up so they can go back and bale it. Well, those things break, right? I mean, once again, built-in obsolescence, right?
Yeah.
But they're great steel. And I like working with those on a lot of different projects, because I'm looking at it as, wow, this piece of metal was used to feed somebody's family.
Right.
Provide a life for somebody else, and to me, it has that energy, and being able to continue giving it another life to keep it back in the cycle, and it kind of carries that story forward, right? If that makes sense.
And I think it's important that you talk about the stories that metal can tell. And in some of the, I want to say, the Irish folklore, you talk about warriors who clean their swords after a battle, and their sword tells them the stories of what happened, especially if they took someone else's sword. You'll have to elaborate on that, because I'm not doing a good job of it.
And in the Irish lore, early Irish mythology, right? The first and second battle of Moytura, which is the two major Irish battles in the beginning. That is when they were coming to and defending Ireland. There was, back during that time, you had a lot of respect for, well, your swords, because once again, you take care of your tool takes care of you. But the thought was, if you were dishonorable, right, your sword would turn against you, right? It would break, or it wouldn't defend you, which I think is where we get that swearing on a swords, right? Where you promise on a sword, because it had that spirituality to it. And I think what you're referring to is tribute, right? So you're paying tribute to a weapon, and cleaning it, taking care of it, talking to it, telling your story, listening to the story. I think we get so wrapped in to us, right, that we don't pay attention to other things that are around us and what's going on in other how other energy, spirits, whatever, how they interact with us, right? Our paths cross, and we don't even pay attention to it because we're focused on what we're doing. And it's about taking the time to. I came up with a nomenclature. It's called flow, which is to take some time with the metal and just feel it, you know, and just kind of see what's happening, because it has a vibration, and then to take the time and listen to the story, right, and be open to what it wants, not necessarily what we want, you know. Before you have to do these three things, which I think are very imperative, before you can actually get to work with the metal. And I learned this process the hard way, you know, like almost all lessons in my life. You know, once again, I'm Southern Appalachian, so I'm just got a really small, hard-headed streak. Yeah. And I would grab a piece of metal and I would go to make something, and it wouldn't do what I wanted it to do. And I kind of got that little ping in the back of my head, you know, well, why don't you ask? Which is one of those rabbit holes that took me down this path, was to learning more about the metal magic. And once I started thinking more, okay, I want to make this, who wants to be that? You know, my work got a lot easier because I had something working with me versus working against me. If that makes sense.
And that's going back to the whole idea that the metal's conscious.
Yes.
And you were saying that for some projects you would ask the metal, who wants to be this, or for other projects you'd ask the metal, what do you want to be? I thought that was interesting. But one other point you made too is that for people who were taking your class, is you can just look at the metal and tell if they've built a relationship with it or how they've been hitting it. And I thought that was incredible.
Well, that's really kind of how the name of the book came about, because Metal Never Lies, because I can tell. I've been doing this, you know, for a day or so. Yeah. And I can tell them as they're working, I can look at how the metal is responding to their action, how they're hitting it, how they're holding it, how they're heating it, all because it's not separate. It's yes and, right? So all these things, I can take a quick look at it and tell them exactly what's going on, you know, because it'll tell on you, you know. And I kind of bring that over into the magical aspect as well, is that, once again, metal will tell on you. You know, it's a great, you know, getting back to what you were saying earlier about the early lore, metal was a witness, right? Your sword was a witness because you had it with you all the time, you know, so it always bared witness to everything that you were doing, which I think is another example of why you would swear or do an oath on a sword, because it was bearing witness. It would tell if you weren't doing it right.
That's interesting. So about your book, what are some of the reasons why you wrote the book? You were telling me anybody can do it, talking about the practice. And
yeah, I started out, you know, first off, I didn't want to write the book. I'm gonna be honest with you. You know, it's not, I didn't wake up one morning and go, hey, I think I'll write a book, or I was never aspired to want to write a book. Yeah. It's hard. I know that. I know that more now.
You know now.
A lot more now. It wasn't something that I wanted to do, but as I was getting more and more involved in this practice, I started looking for other sources, right? Right. When you want to learn more, you try to find more information. There was nothing out there, and was very much, for the most part, told, well, you know, then you need to write it, you know. And when I first started writing it, I wrote it as a blacksmith. And full disclosure, you know, it was pretty boring. You know, I mean, I loved it because it spoke to me, you know, in my world, but, you know, it really wasn't what it needed to be, right? Because I think that, getting back to what I said earlier, is that we have become disconnected, right, and numb to our surroundings, the way the metal interacts with us. I really needed it to be more geared towards everybody can do it. You know, it's not set up to where you have to have any tools to do metal magic. You don't need it. It's about right relationship. Okay. But how you interact with the metal, how you want to work with the metal, being able to listen to it. And I think very much, even looking at a lot of the reviews, the early reviews that I'm getting in on it, speaks to that, that it is so anybody can do it. You know, there are some projects in it that where if you want to try your hand on them, they're really easy. Most likely you've got majority of the tools, you know, in your toolbox at home. You know, if you have any tools, there's nothing really elaborate. You know, and I wanted to make sure that they were built that way because you know, we don't need to go collect more stuff.
Right.
You know, but I think it's set up to where anybody can do it, you know, and you don't need to go out and go buy a bunch of stuff. You can use, you know, heirlooms that you have, right? You know, I mean, my wife, you know, has got, since we've had these conversations, and she's been stuck listening to me have these conversations about it. You know, it's like a lot of her, you know, she's very much a kitchen witch, and now she's looking at using her metal, right, that she uses her pots and pans or cast iron skillets, she's using that to help create a healthy environment, good, healthy, nutritious food for us, and using that, and kind of, you know, adding that on in.
And that's using metal as a tool as opposed to a weapon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, frying pan can be both, right? So
It depends on who you are and who's wielding it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. I love it. I have a cast iron skillet and I love that. Use it all the time. But you don't have to be a blacksmith in order to actually do the magical blacksmithing. Like you were saying with anybody can do it with heirlooms or things that you have.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I've gotten a lot of feedback from others that have, you know, tried some of the projects or taken what is in the book and used them on things that they currently have. You know, we have a lot of, you know, people that are magically inclined, you know, and have ritual tools. A lot of those tools are metal, you know, so you don't have to go make something, you know, you already have it. You know, it's just, all right, so let's take that relationship and just really, you know, see how far we want to go with it, you know, and just looking at it completely different.
Right. And you were talking about magical blacksmithing as a practice that takes time. And you mentioned that when you were talking about flow, but we're talking just hours to do the actual pounding of the metal, but time that you spend building a relationship with it through meditation or the labyrinth or things like that. It's something that's a process. It's not something you can just go out and do immediately.
Well, I mean, that's why I kind of refer to it as a practice. You know, the more you work on it, the better you'll get at it. It's like with anything that's in my life, you know, I don't become an expert, you know, when I first do it. You know, it takes, back to the hard-headed thing, it takes me a little while to figure out what not to do before I actually get it right. You know, so, I mean, a lot of that is, you know, being able to, you know, if you're fairly good, you know, and have a pretty good meditation practice, that'll cut your learning curve down, you know, because now you'll have a better way to kind of connect and be quiet and kind of put yourself in a realm to where you're open to being able to feel and listen and those type things, you know. But if not, then that's a practice, you know, that you're also going to have to learn to get the connection with the metal as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, you know, a lot of this is kind of, you know, it's kind of yes and, you know, and I carry, you know, when I leave the house, I carry metal with me, a little pocket notion, you know, pocket charm, whatever you want to say. It's just a little something that I've whipped up that I carry for protection, you know, that I just throw it down there with my change, you know, but it's, you know, it's those little things. It's just a hunk of metal, you know, you wouldn't even know it's nothing really special, you know, other than I created it for a particular, you know, reason. But you don't have to really even do that. You can take a, you know, piece of metal and scratch it out with a nail, you know, work your sigil into something. You don't need, you know, like I said, anybody can do it, but it's not the act of actually putting in a sigil or, you know, design or anything like that. It's all the work up to that. That's the last part. That's the work part of the flow, FLOW. You know, you have to feel, listen, and be open to what the metal wants before you can do the work, right? Before you get what you want, you need to figure out what it wants.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And this process is really very simple. And that's what makes it so good if you're wanting to disconnect and kind of get back into yourself or to do more inner work as well as while you're doing the blacksmithing.
Yeah, it's simple and it's not. I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy to do and easy not to do. Right. So,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, I think that's the key is, it's really up to the individual, it's where they want to go with it, how far down the rabbit hole they want to go, and what they want to get out of. I mean, someone may not want to get to kind of where I am with it, and they just want to get a little bit more in tune with their surroundings and start being a little more participatory, right, and what's going on around them, and try to work with what you have and build, an ally, lack of a better word. There's nothing wrong with just that. They don't have to go, kind of all in, so to speak. I think you can kind of work it as you go and see how things work, but I think the first part is just, being able to feel, is being conscious, knowing that right? Because you don't know.
Yeah. So what's the benefit that you get on a day-to-day basis of being involved with that relationship with a metal, or with that consciousness in the metal? How does that change you?
For me, it's completely changed my life, because I feel so much more connected to my world, because metal is a huge part. Well, I'm a blacksmith, so it's a huge part of my vocation, right? But metal is a huge part of our world. I've got the exercises that I kind of outline some of that to get people to kind of start thinking that way in the book. It's just, you think about all the metal that surrounded you in just a room that you're sitting in, and start, taking an inventory and looking around you. You've got a lamp, most likely you've got all the copper running through the walls, right? You've got, like you had mentioned earlier, your car keys, cooking pots, utensils, stove. I mean, there's just a lot of things that surround us that are metal already, and we don't have to do anything, but we don't see them.
Yeah.
I did not see them. I'm not going to put a judge on anybody, but I didn't see them until I started paying attention to it. And, I think just start, finding some place to start. And if all you do is just are more attentive to what is going on around you, for me, it completely changed my life, because I became much more of an active participant in my life than just cohabitating.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. And it's a whole different attitude you have when you think that everything is conscious or everything is alive, as opposed to just thinking, humans, animals, and plants. So
well, I mean, everything's connected.
Around, yeah, everything's connected.
I look at, where we are on our land. I look at what we do here as we're caretakers. We don't necessarily own this land. We are taking care of it. I cannot take this land with me.
Right.
When I cross over, the land will stay here and I'll move on. So I look at trying to create an area so people can come and have a place to do their work, right? To have the healing of the lands and the attunements that the land has, because it's a very magical place. And I think that helps a lot with people that do come here and check in, lack of a better word, to kind of see about that.
Yeah, and I really like the word that you use, the caretaker word, because we need to have caretakers of the consciousness for all the different life forms on the planet. The metals, the crystals, the plants, the animals, the humans, and you have that more for humans and more for animals and more for plants, but not so much for metals. And I think that's what's so unique about what you're doing and what you've written about, and that's what makes your book so unique, is you're talking about being a caretaker for the metal and building a relationship with the metal. And I think that's what's really interesting about what you do and what you've been able to achieve with your work.
Well, I think for me, once I understood that I'm not separate from it, that it's not, it changed our living arrangement, right? Once I figured out that I can't live without iron and I can't live without copper, it changed my relationship with it.
Yeah.
So.
I could go down a rabbit hole with that one, but I think I'll just, for everybody on the call, this was our little quiet sign that you're going down a rabbit hole. So it was fun, But I really do, and I like the word caretaker, and it's good to think of our lives for the work that we do each individually and as a group of caretaking the earth and the life that's in it in different ways, shapes, and forms. So, and I like that. And you teach that in your courses that you do on your property. And could you talk a little bit about the courses that you have, and like the number of people and what you cover and things like that?
Well, on our weekends, there's two different type of weekends. There's an immersion and an intensive, and the immersions are 3 days, and an intensive is 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all limited to 6 people, 6 participants, because I want to be able to teach, and I'm assuming that's why people come, is to learn. They're able to share our food. My wife cooks, so we have home cooked meals, because you need to be fed when you do this, right?
Yeah.
The last thing you need to be, I would feed everybody just hot dogs, but she won't let me do that. So she feeds everybody really well, and it gives us an opportunity just to kind of be, we can focus on the task at hand and not have to worry about all the outside minutia. And I live in one of the rare places, probably one of the only places that I know of that doesn't get cell service yet.
Mm.
We're not that far from the city, but we're in this really unique kind of little area that you don't get cell service. So it almost forces you to become disconnected and not pay attention to what's going on outside. And like I said, it's all very primitive. We use wood, so there's no coal. Even my own personal forge, I make my own charcoal from wood that's already down. Or leftover wood from a carpenter shop or something like that. I reuse I repurpose everything. So I make my own charcoal, and we use wood here at the smithy to forge with.
Right.
That's the way they used to do it. Not everybody had access to coal. That stuff's just nasty. So I use charcoal, and so we learn how to build a forge, how to work with the fire. It's a very elemental process if you're into that kind of thing, because you've got the earthen forge that you're literally building your forge in, and then you've got the air of your bellows, right? Because you'll make your own bellow kit to take with you. So you've got the air, and then you've got the fire. You've got your water of your quench tank. You've got your own personal spirit, right? So it's very, very, very much elemental. So you're kind of seeing how elements work together, as you're co-creating whatever it is that you're making. And that's one of the reasons I like to have a small group, is I can work with everybody pretty much individually throughout the weekend to help them create whatever it is that they want to create. I don't put any limits on that. We have a discussion of, is that really something you want to do on your first project, or whatever. But it's, once again, I look at it as, I'm holding space, for everybody to get their work done, because I'm very much the type of person that my work is providing people the tools so they can do their work.
Right.
That's kind of what my life mission is, I think, right now at this particular point, is, I'm providing space so people can come and be safe, and pay attention and do the work that they need to get done. And that's what I do.
Yeah. And you were talking about how it changes people over the course of the weekend too, how they may even look different. They act differently after everything's complete, after the course is done.
Yeah, it's an amazing transformation that you get people to spend three or 4 days just surrounded by nature, to where you're not constantly bombarded with the same news, every 24-hour cycle, where you're, you don't have to worry, you don't have any worries while you're here, right? Very whatever the Lion King thing is, or I can't even think of it. Hakuna Matata, is that it?
There you go.
I blocked it out of my memory for my kids, right? So anyway, so it's very much that there's no worries while they're here. They're fed, they camp out here on the land. There's a creek that runs so they can go sit down by the water. There's a labyrinth that they can walk. They can just take time. There's not really a schedule, other than the time to eat, so people can kind of go off, be off by themselves alone to do the work they need to do. It's not it's not regimented, right? We have when we eat breakfast and when we eat supper, everything else in between is pretty much at everybody's self-paced. so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a, it's a great time, and people do it. It changes people. And I get people that repeat it, and I've got some people that have done it 3 times, and people that have, one guy read the book, said, I'm coming back. I got more stuff I got to work on. I'm coming back. So when it's very satisfying for me knowing that I am doing good work.
Right. And people don't need to have any prior blacksmithing knowledge or come with any tools or whatever. You take care of a lot of those things for them as well.
Exactly. There are some tools that you'll need, but most of it, like I said, you're going to probably already have, safety glasses and, a hammer and gloves and that kind of stuff. I don't provide those kind of things, but most everybody's going to have them. If you don't have them, we can figure it out. But, for the most part, everybody's got their own because, you're going to want to continue it, when you get home. Mm-hmm.
And could you talk a little bit about the difference between the primitive blacksmithing course and the metal magic course?
Okay. That's probably a really good question. So the primitive class is mainly more on learning the skill of blacksmithing in a primitive level. So we'll actually, that's where we're digging the hole and we're actually assembling bellows because you're going to take the bellows home. I send you home with everything but your animal. Right. So you've got everything that you need when you return home so you can go home and dig a hole in the ground and go to work. Right. So my object for that weekend is to get you to the point to where you can go home and continue the craft. Okay. The metal magic course, we use stand-up forges, right? What I call stand-up forges. They're real fancy. They're in 55-gallon drums. They're high dollar stuff, right? I use here. Nothing but the best for my folks. But basically it's the forge in the ground just standing up because it's just lined with dirt, right? So we forge, there, they got a hand crank. So there's not, we remove that element and we spend more time on working with the metal, right? And learning simple blacksmithing techniques in that area to where the primitive class is much more about blacksmithing and learning techniques and how to hit certain ways and those type of things, whereas the magical metalworking is not quite to that extent. And then there's basically one that combines the both classes, which is the intensive, to where you'll do the primitive part, make your bellows, learn your smithing, and then you continue throughout the weekend on working with the metal magically. And that's like drinking out of a fire hose. Yeah. That's an intensive.
And does the metal magic get into building the relationship?
Yes, most definitely. Yeah. No, we spend a lot of time with that. I will lay out for the weekend, just lay out metal, and just let them pick what they want from out of the stack of metal, whatever speaks to them, it's between them and the metal. I don't really have anything to do with that. I kind of show up, pay attention, let it go, so it's, there's a lot of flexibility. Like I said, it's really, it's about what they're doing, what they want to learn and what the metal's teaching them. Because it's shocking to me still seeing people become aware.
And
explain it.
Yeah, the last comment before we start taking questions is how can people get more information?
You can go on my website. It's ravenskeepforge.com. Ravens with an S. ravenskeepforge.com. And I'm on social media, Facebook and Insta, and just go to the website. They'll have a little bit of a shop there. The courses are listed, email there, reach out to me. I think my phone number is up there. I don't care. If it's meant to be, you call me, if you got to, I don't care.
And you have a lot of interesting blog posts up there too. I think you've been posting since March, but like every couple weeks, and they're all really interesting. I just want to add that because I've been looking at it.
Thank you. And it's a lot of it's about my journey, the things that pop up, the things I think need to be said. It's about metal, it's, in the relationship to it and things that we don't think about with it. It's fun. And just a few other little life events that happen. But yeah, I don't get preachy. There's enough of that other stuff out there. I don't need it and y'all don't want to hear it. And I ain't the guy.
Well, that's good. Well, let's spend some time answering some questions from some of the attendees tonight. And Leslie, do you want to run on that one?
Sure. So far, we don't have any questions from the audience. So I'm gonna ask one. So when you're saying that I can go dig a hole in my yard and start blacksmithing, could you talk to me a little bit about what that process looks like? I live in a condo, so I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna have to be careful about that hole in the fire I set. So is it possible for people who don't have a backyard, for example, to do this kind of work?
Well, in that case, a lot of times, if you're living in that type of environment, you're probably a pretty good sized city. There may be a maker space.
Oh, okay.
You have access to, and a lot of your maker spaces now, because I teach at one. I actually just teach the blacksmithing part. That's in Winston. So if Winston has one, chances are, your other major cities probably have a maker space as well, to where you could use that. If you don't have access to, a place where you can dig a hole. And when I say hole, I mean, we're talking, it's like a duck's nest, so it ain't real big. You don't.
And what kind of wood typically would you burn, Sam? Is it hardwoods?
Once again, it's that high dollar stuff. It's pine. It's stuff nobody wants. It's perfect.
Okay.
It burns really, because what you're doing is you're basically making the technical part of it. You're making charcoal as you go, no matter what type of forge that you're using. And pine makes charcoal really quick, because it burns really hot.
Right.
It doesn't last long, but it burns really hot. And we get a hurricane and people are begging me to come get the pine, so it's free, which is really good,
Now, do you have to let that wood cure?
Yeah, but pine doesn't take long to dry out,
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like oak or nothing like that. It's cut and split in a couple months, you can use it.
Okay, all righty.
Because I'm using 9-inch pieces. We're not digging the great big huge hole. It's literally it's a mixing bowl size if you're trying to get a size on it. Yeah, a large mixing bowl. Could
I use a large mixing bowl? Don't think that's a stupid question.
Probably not. Yeah, probably not.
Because it'd melt right through, wouldn't it?
Is there an asterisk somewhere on here to where please don't taking this kind of advice may be harmful to your health or something? Do I gotta? It's going to get rid of it.
Hey man, we're city folks. What do you want?
And that was the hardest thing about the book is that I'm Southern Appalachian, so these things are just natural to me, and me learning how to put that in other people's context. Because one of the attendees that I had said, you should teach this to where it's urban folks. She lived in D.C. Because I get people that come from literally all over the country, from Washington State, Oregon, that come to my magical class because there's nothing else out there like it. But she said, you need to teach this so I can do it when I get home.
Right.
And that's what kind of got my wheels turning. You got that little pain. Once again, you pay attention, you get yourself in all kinds of trouble.
Right.
And that's why the book I think is written to the point to where everybody can do it. It's at any level.
All right, audience, come on with those questions.
You have a couple of hands up.
Jane and Jerry. Mark, I can't get them off. I'm not sure how to get them off of mute.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't unmute. I was just curious what people forged. Like, I like to paint, and I don't always have a plan in mind, but.
Welcome to my world. That's.
But what do people make when they're blacksmithing? As a creative, it's a creative outlet, I'm assuming.
I think very much so. I've seen people make, just pendants, right? They make spirals and pendants. Some people will make, candle scribes. I've seen folks that have made fire pokers for their fire pit, so it's kind of an extension of a metal wand kind of thing. There's just a variety. I've seen people that make torques. They'll make pocket charms. The list, I can be here, how much time we got here? Because there's a lot of it is just really kind of up to you. And your that's the great thing about smithing is really kind of up to your imagination as to, what you want to make. I've seen people make, candle holders, like tea lights or pillars. And the list can go on and on and on. And it's, like you said, creative outlet. A lot of it's just kind of depends on where you are and what the metal wants to be.
Okay. Oh, I like
I
this.
don't know if that makes any sense. If you go on the website to where the classes are, at the bottom of the page, there's a gallery of past classes, and you'll see a lot of stuff that participants have made while they were here. It's a blast.
Okay. I have a question. I'm sorry I
Sure.
was late. Sorry I was late. I missed your introduction. But from listening what you said, I was wondering, is there anything that you can tell us about maybe like a spiritual awakening that has occurred? Because these people are going back to their early hundreds of years, earlier, what people normally did on a daily basis. And like you said, their mind is in a different dimension when they're with you. But I seem to don't understand whether you work with them and they have some kind of awakening or a change in their attitudes about life and things like that. Is this what you're hoping people will find?
Really not for me to say. I can tell you what people's experiences have been.
That's good.
Once again, my responsibility is just to hold space so people have a safe place. I've had people that have, really got connected to the metal and to life more, as an experience. I don't know about spiritual awakening. Most people come to the magical classes, or pretty much have a spirituality to where they've got the earth-based spirituality, pagan thought process to begin with. So it's not so much there's an aha, except for, wow, there's a completely new life that I now have access to that I didn't know I had before. Does that answer your question, Jerry?
Yes, I can see that. For example, I would say that if somebody wanted to work with crystals and become familiar with them and things like that, there's something like that, and you get something like that from working with metals, I believe.
Exactly. And except that, I don't know that much about crystals, right? Because it's just not my thing. But I do know with metal, every piece of metal that I have that I've created has its own unique life. Especially the metal that has been ritually forged for particular purposes, they all have its own unique life, personality, if that makes sense. And I'm assuming, my wife does more of the crystal thing, and to her that kind of resonates with her. But I can't speak to. I'm assuming it's a pretty good. Somebody else that answer would be a pretty good.
Yeah. My only other comment is it's smart that you stay away from the frankfurters.
Stay away from the what?
Frankfurters, hot dogs.
Frankfurters. I like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Jim?
Hi, Sam. I wonder if this would be maybe a comparison. Suppose somebody ran a horse farm, and instead of just having horses for people to ride, you went there to learn how to communicate with the horses. Would that be maybe a similar? You're putting people into some form of communication with the metal, right?
Being that I have worked with horses, not to that level as far as communicating with them, but I do know, to me, it's a different, it's an entity, right? I mean, to me, they have the spirit, they have a life. And I think it gives people permission to do that, if that makes sense.
Yep.
It's like, once again, my facilitation is holding space and showing them the way, right? Here are some activities that you can do. I can't do the push-ups for you, but I can give you the space you need to do the work.
Yeah. So what kind of comments when people get done with this, let's call it a workshop or however, what do you want to call it? What kind of insights have they gotten that they didn't have when they went there?
Well, a lot of them is they will understand the difference, without me telling them, or they have their own unique experiences, the differences between the metals. They are they're completely unique in their personalities. We'll use that as a lack of a better word. You know, and how they work with them. And some people will be naturally drawn to one over another, which I think is very telling for me, because I work with them, so I can kind of tell. Because I think you're always drawn to your opposite, right? Or you're always drawn to what you need. You know, so whatever I see somebody that picks that up more, is drawn to that, most likely it's because they have a need. I hate to say lack, you know, because I think that's kind of a judgment. I just think there's a greater need for that. But I don't know that anybody has come through it that hasn't been radically changed. You know, everybody's got their own level of that, whatever that looks like for everybody individually, you know. I know that because I got people that coming back 2 and 3 times, and each time they get something more out of it.
Mhm. That's interesting.
Yeah. So, you know, if you need to, you can go read some of the testimonials. And I'll let you tell them, you know, or let them tell you.
Raven, I believe you have a question.
Hello. So I'm maybe like the odd energy out, not that I should place that judgment, but I really resonated with everything that you said, but not in a blacksmith way, more so in somebody that also kind of realized about the communication with metal. So like, I don't know if I can turn my camera, but might be intense, so I'm just gonna warn everybody. But like right now I have this tool that I made like with metal on it. And then this is like traditionally like a dance pole. So I'm like, but I actually don't use it traditionally at all because of what you're saying, like because of the way that it communicated to me. And so I actually use it more akin to like how our indigenous people would have used like a tree pole. And I use it as like a tool in my ritualistic practices. But I too have had trouble articulating this, and also like, I don't know, like just the way that you were like, I didn't even want to write this book, but like nobody else is talking about it. I can really like resonate with that. So I guess my question would be like, for somebody like me, that's kind of like, you know, picking up on these communications in the animistic layer, but extending it beyond the animals and the plants and everything. Like, you know, if you take blacksmithing out of it, is there something you could like suggest for how like to help others? Or is it really just like this like feeling like I should be bringing them into the space? Or like I have kind of asked like other dance studios if I could like teach witchcraft as an example as opposed to that, so that they were looking at it like the divination tool was. And then my other question would be, would blacksmithing, like, you know, light a fire under my ass, excuse the pun, like with something like this? Because then I'd be connecting to it in that like ancestral way. So sorry, those were like intense questions, but I'm literally like this metal witch where there's no information. And I was like mind blown by everything. So thank you.
I understand. First question is how you know, get in touch, I think is a lot kind of what we had talked about with the flow. You know, it's just taking the time to be present, right? However that you want to set your space that way, and just kind of just feel, right? Spend some time. And it's not always one right after the other, right? So you can, you know, take a day or two or a week or whatever and just kind of feel what's going on, you know, and get to the point to where you then can start listening to what it wants to say, and then be open to what it wants, you know, because that's a different step process too. And then once you kind of got a good idea of what all that is, then you can start working with it in a way to where it's more, you're more entangled, right? I think I picked up that word up from you, Mark. I really like that word. You're more entangled, right? And then as far as the blacksmithing goes, you know, I'm going to lean that way because I know what it does, right? And I know the difference, even where people have understood this process and come back, gone through the process again, and getting some deeper, more robust, I really don't like that word, but it fits right now, robust relationship with the metal. You know, so I think it really kind of depends on what your end result you want to be. You know, I'm gonna lean to the smithing because I think it's just a different way to set yourself apart in a way to where that is the focus. You know, there's none of this other stuff going on in the outside. That is the focus. So how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go, right? I think that's actually a title that I've got in the book. You know, how far down you want to go. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
We should. I will definitely. I want to talk to you. So thank you.
Yeah, just hit me up afterwards and we can have a conversation because I know you're going to get the book anyway. So.
Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate it. It's just the ancestral component in the blacksmithing. I think you're on to something there. So thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Jim, I believe you have another question.
Yeah, when Faye was speaking, that looked like a piece of gnarled wood you had on that dance pole. And I found myself thinking, you know, if consciousness exists everywhere, then couldn't somebody learn how to open up to wood and work with wood in the way that you're working with metal?
I don't see why not. You know, I mean, I've seen some carpenters come up with some outlandish stuff that's out of this world. No pun intended. You know, I don't see why not. I mean, it's a sense in it being as well, I think.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Mark, it looks like everybody's, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, that's my whole vocation. So my whole vocation is working with the trees and the metal and the wood in my own lineage, from the Scottish Isles, like the Celtic Isles as well. So, you know what I mean? But that's true. And to be honest, if I were to leave you with a pondering of a rabbit hole, you might want to dive down. Why do children pick up sticks and intuitively know what to do with them? It's the same thing that Sam's communicating with the metal. Everything is like that animistic. So yeah, if anyone wants to do that, you could definitely combine them.
There you go.
Jerry?
Yeah, Sam, I wanted to ask you, when you work with the different metals, do you feel the energy, different energy levels? Do you feel the presence of different energy levels coming out of the different things you create? Or at any time, do you feel the energy in terms of vibration or
Yeah, most
heat
definitely.
or thing? And they, you know, in a sense, I want to jump on what Jim was saying. Is there any kind of communication that your intuition picks up on, and you feel like you're being informed by the universe by working with these metals?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I don't have yes.
Thank you.
You know, because I mean, a lot of it is, you know, I'm a co-creator, right? So a lot of times I look at myself as an active spectator. You know, I'm just kind of there. I'm letting the metal do the work, right? Because there's things that I've created in a time that I've created them in that I really don't know how that happened. You know, and I've been doing this a while. You know, I'm like, I can't believe I'm there. You know, because it's just, you know, I show up, I pay attention, I let go of the outcome. You know, I think a lot of times, you know, to answer your question, Joe, I think a lot of times it depends on what it is I'm making, right? So if I'm making, you know, a spear tip or a sword that's used in a certain type of ritual or it has a certain intention behind it, the forging is different. right, than it is if I'm making, say I'm making a ward, you know, for somebody's property. You know, it's a different action, you know, and all the actions are different. So the feelings are going to be different. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, but yes, without a doubt. I mean, because there's a lot of times I'll be forging, you know, I'll hear, no, not like that, like this, you know, and yeah, and I just, okay, well, whatever. You know?
I had a friend who would work with metal at the time. You know, he'd make gates and he'd make different pieces of metal for people's homes and things like that. And he was kind of different from the rest of us in terms of a livelihood. But I remember him once saying, I don't want to do anything else in my life. This is what I want to do. And now I understand.
Yeah, it's yeah, you get it in, you know, under your nails, and you know, it like I said it, I say it all the time in my classes. There's two types of people that leave my weekends: those that are glad to do it, that they did it, and those that'll do it again.
Very good.
Yeah, those are the only two types of people that leave.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? All right, well, Mark, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Thank you, Leslie. And Sam, thank you for the time we've had to spend together. For everyone on the call, Sam is an unusual bird. He's got a unique vocation, and he's done some great things from a consciousness perspective with it. And I'm glad we had this time to pull that out of you, Sam, and learn a little bit more about your life and about what you do with it. So thank you very much for this time, and thank you all for attending. And with that, we'll close this call.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you,
Bye.
Sam.